if Scotland leaves the United Kingdom, it's not the end of the United Kingdom. Legally, the United Kingdom will continue to exist, but it will exist without Scotland. It will be United Kingdom of England, Wales, and Northern Ireland. Scotland wouldn't be part of it. It's what constitutional lawyers and other commentators are now referring to as the rump UK or rest of UK. If you study the literature on this now, you see a small case R before UK, R-UK meaning what would be the rest of the UK after Scotland left. And although the matter of law, and Brian is quite right, and so is Stephanie, on whether Scotland will have to apply for membership of the EU as an independent country, will probably in the end be a matter of politics. International law is quite clear on what happens if Scotland breaks with the rest of the UK. Rump UK inherits all the treaty obligations. There's absolutely no doubt in international law about this. It's the one that remains a member of the EU. It's the one that keeps its seat in the Security Council, at least for now, and is a member of NATO. So, and would stay in the EU. So in other words, Rump UK would stay in the EU, it would lose some seats and some of its rebate. It would remain as a member of the UN, but of course the Security Council seat, which is already under threat, would become under more threat, and it would remain a member of NATO, though NATO would be rather anxious to know what the hell we were going to do with our nuclear deterrent if it had to leave Fastlane. Scotland would be the new kid on the block. It might even have to apply for EU membership, but I'll come on to that in a moment. It would certainly have to apply for UN membership. That would be a formality. The international precedents in law for this are very strong. Pakistan was regarded as the new country when when it broke from India post-partition. India was the one that inherited all the previous obligations of the Raj. Russia stayed in the UN Security Council, while all the ex-Soviet satellites and colonies had to apply for membership again of all the other bodies, including the UN. More recently, and actually they both begin with S, and although they're very different countries, South Sudan, which decided to leave from Sudan. Sudan stayed as the member of the UN. Rump Sudan stayed a member. South Sudan had to apply for new membership. The succeeding state is the one that starts afresh in this. And I think it's very interesting. So you're not seeing the end of the UK. You're seeing a changed situation, a different UK. Now, what does worry Alex Salmond is that independent Scotland would have to apply again for EU membership. And the reason why that's a worry, I mean, it could... In a sense, it shouldn't, because, of course, in the end, Scotland will be, if he has to, Scotland will almost certainly be accepted as a member. But if he has to apply as a new member, then under the terms of application now, he has to commit to the euro and to Schengen. And Scotland isn't going to vote for the euro, and it isn't going to vote for border posts at Berwick, which is why this is trying to be kept quiet. Now, Mr. Salmond is adamant that Scotland would automatically be in the EU with neither an obligation to be part of Schengen or to join the euro. But it is really murky territory. And I think Stephanie is right. In the end, the politics will sort this out. There are a number of authorities, from the Professor of International Law at the University of Glasgow, the Professor of International Law at the University of Edinburgh. For me, you couldn't get two finer authorities in the world. To the House of Commons Library Report, are all pretty sure that Scotland would have to reapply. Appearing on STV on Thursday night, the former British ambassador, John Kerr, I think it was, Brian? John Kerr said, in his view, British ambassador to Brussels, Scotland would have to reapply. Now, there's a strong advice where the EC constitutive treaties would apply, and they say, too, that they think Scotland would have to reapply. Now, Mr. Salmond has his own authorities as well, and they're also quite impressive. The key issue, as I asked him on Sunday, is what advice has he had from the Scottish law authorities. He said he's had advice, but he won't publish it. He said he won't publish it because it's a Westminster precedent not to publish it. For a man who wants to break away from Westminster, I don't quite understand why Westminster precedent matters. I mean, this is about the future of Scotland and the United Kingdom. You would think that both the advice that we get from Brussels and the advice that we get from the Scottish law officers and the advice that we get from the Westminster law officers should all be in the public domain before this vote takes place. But so far, he's refusing to do so. Now, a Scottish application would have to be agreed by all 27 existing members, including Rump UK. Westminster will want to be really nice to Scotland for the foreseeable future to try and convince them to stay in. If, despite all that, Scotland decides to leave, that is when the gloves really come off. You want to be a member of the EU, Mr. Salmon, but you want to kick our nukes out of fast lane. You want to take all of the oil, but as little of the debt as you can. You don't want to take any of the debt from the toxic banks, but you still want to take the oil revenues. You want a monetary union, but you don't think that the Royal Bank of Scotland should be any of your problem. That is when the British establishment starts to get tough. And I foresee a really acrimonious divorce settlement if it gets to this situation. So Mr. Salmon is so anxious to avoid Euro membership that official SNP policy is to retain sterling. But let me just point out again that until recently, SNP policy was to join the Euro after a post-independence referendum on the Euro. Mr. Salmon's conversion has come pretty late. It was, he was more Europhile than almost anybody. When most other Europhile politicians had abandoned the Euro, Mr. Salmon told Spanish television and the BBC in January 2009 that the Euro strengthened the case for independence. That before the Eurozone crisis happened, he said that John Swinney now says it's a distant prospect. Again, changing policy in order not to frighten the horses. And on monetary union, he's opened now a can of worms. Who would be Scotland's lender of last resort? If there was a run on the Scottish banks, which we know can happen, or if a Scottish sovereign debt crisis was to take place. Couldn't really be the Bank of England unless there was a treaty agreement, because that would be a potential cost on Rump UK. If there was no lender of last resort, Scottish bonds undoubtedly would demand a higher coupon. There would be no freedom to set interest rates. Edinburgh would have to adopt whatever rates London could apply. And I have to tell you, someone who used to cover these things in Scotland year after year, the biggest nationalist complaint was interest rates are always set to suit the overheated London economy and never for Scotland. That will continue under independence if Mr. Salmon gets its way. Indeed, it's possible that Scotland, rather than moving these gold assets that Stephanie was talking about, it may have to keep these as part of security to be part of the monetary union. And it is clear, as Stephanie emphasized again, that the one thing we've learned about monetary union from the Eurozone crisis is that it doesn't work unless there's a degree of fiscal coordination. That is why the Germans have pushed for fiscal union, why the treaty that Mr. Cameron thought he had vetoed, that probably didn't, is now taking place. And so on Saturday, Mr. Salmon admitted to me that there actually would have to be some kind of fiscal pact with England, or Rump UK, if they were to proceed with monetary union. That although John Swinney had said to me in January that monetary policy, yep, we'd have to keep that part of Rump UK, but we'd be completely free on fiscal policy, and that's what matters. Now Mr. Salmon is saying that he would have to agree a fiscal stability pact with the UK government and the UK monetary authorities. And he talked about 3% of GDP, and that anyway Scotland could be trusted to stick to that. I would just point out that the original Act of Union in 1703 was actually a financial bailout. Scotland was bust, had lost a third of its national wealth in the abortive Darien adventure in Central America, and it meant that Scottish merchants could not trade because of the Navigation Acts with the growing English Empire, and that the money came in to bail out Scotland. So whether it would be able to do the same again is another matter. So I think that all of these lines he's taken, I could go on, and a number of these, strategically they are it's a very sensible way to go. Tactically, it opens up huge weaknesses. Because if you're going to have a common monetary union with Rump UK, if you accept, which means you can't set your own interest rates, you don't control the money supply, you may not have a lender of last resort, and you accept that you will also need some kind of fiscal stability pact with Rump UK, then frankly, in economic policy terms, I cannot see the difference between that and Devolmax, where you stay part of the United Kingdom. I just don't see what the difference is.